What's going on, everyone? This is both a video and the My Aggie Nation podcast this week. I got Robert Cessna over here. I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle. And we have one Bob Holt from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette to break down A&M's newest hire, Bobby Petrino, the offensive coordinator that, of course, was the head coach at Arkansas. First, let's start off with Bob. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We're getting ready for a big hoops game tonight, Arkansas and Alabama.
Oh, wow. That's great.
6 o'clock. Yeah, it's a big game.
Have a good holidays, Bob?
It was okay. Drove to Memphis on Christmas Day. Everyone's dream, I know. It was the Liberty Bowl, but it was good. It turned out to be a wild game. Arkansas beat Kansas in triple overtime. So, and the Liberty Bowl folks are good people. So it was fine. Yeah, but it was okay.
Yeah, we went to the Liberty Bowl. That's one of those bowls. I don't have any problem going, as long as it's not every other year, as long as you can go every 4 years, 5 years. It's not one of the bigger bowls, but I'll take the Liberty Bowl. Got that nice jacket. They still get those nice jackets, those nice pullovers?
We got a hat, but hey, anything free is appreciated.
Cutbacks.
There you go.
Well, I'm glad I got the pullover.
Well, the biggest news in Bryan College Station these days is Bobby Petrino coming to town to be the offensive coordinator. Bob, let's just start with what are your general recollections of Bobby Petrino as a head coach at Arkansas, and what are, at least football-wise, what are A&M fans getting into down here?
Well, I mean, he's an elite offensive play caller. You know, as a head coach, he always called the plays. Excuse me. I think he's called the plays wherever he's been forever and ever. You know, he's offensive play caller in the NFL, and then he called the plays when he was the Falcons head coach there briefly for 13 games, I think it was. And I remember Paul Petrino, his brother, who I believe is at Central Florida now. Paul was the head coach at Idaho for a while, went to a bowl game there. And he always said, you know, it didn't make sense for Bobby not to call the plays, even as the head coach, because he was so good at it. He is so good at it. And I remember Paul had this saying that it was a saying that Petrino's used, was their offense philosophy is FTS, feed the studs. In other words, get the ball to your playmakers. And that's really what their offense revolves around, is making sure, their best players get the ball in their best positions, get the ball in space. You know, they always ran a lot of crossing routes. People think of Bobby Petrino as a, passing guy. And, of course, he is. He had great quarterbacks here like Ryan Mallett. Tyler Wilson was all SEC. Mallett was a third-round pick in the NFL. I think Ryan or Tyler was a fourth-round pick. And he had a lot of great receivers here. But he also always had a good running game. You know, now Davis rushed for over 1,300 yards. I guess it was in 2010. Unfortunately, tore up his knee in the preseason in 2011. Missed that year, but he had a couple 1,000-yard rushers here, and he's going to have good balance. Bobby basically is going to exploit whatever he can defensively, depending on who they're playing. You know, he's not going to throw the ball 50 times necessarily, or I think he's going to do whatever it takes to win the game and move the ball. But he's a guy that always impressed me with how he could analyze, break down a team's defense and figure out mismatches. And one of the things he always did that I think he really enjoyed the most, I don't think he's super comfortable being in front of the camera, but he had a coach's show, like everybody has a coach's show, right, for the extra money. And a segment he used to do was he would break down they put some plays up on a big screen. He would just go up there and start diagramming things like, here's how this guy got so wide open on this touchdown. And you could tell he was really in his element doing that. So I think A&M's getting an elite offensive mind, an elite play caller, and it's hard to believe a team having Bobby Petrino calling plays and not moving the ball pretty well.
You know, Bob, you mentioned, I was thinking about coming in when we talk about this. Remember the time he dominated, Mike Sherman's team, and I was always impressed how he could call third downs. And I do remember what you talked about, that how he made good use of who he had, because I didn't think Mallett was a great quarterback. I didn't think he was going to go to the NFL and do great things. I remember Davis, what a great running back. I remember what you saying about how good he used all the people. And I'm thinking about him and Jimbo, and I thought, well, I could see that because the tight ends or the running game. But now I want to ask you a question, which I didn't know. Say what you will, those games when he played A&M was 2000. 2009, 2010, that's like 13 years ago. And the way that people use the spread now and the way the offenses have changed and all the young bucks like the Rileys and the Kendall Browse and whatever. My question is, how do you think his offensive philosophy works now? And I know Arkansas played Missouri, whoever it was this year. Does he use more of the spread, or is he still doing mainly the same things he was doing back in like 2010 or 11?
Well, yeah, it was a Missouri State FCS team, and they gave Arkansas all they wanted. They were up on Arkansas 17-0, and Arkansas ended up winning the game. I think it was 38-27. But to say that Missouri State threw a scare into Arkansas would be an understatement. They had a little shovel pass to Rocket Sanders that broke free, and then they had a punt return. And but they were trailing that game going to the fourth quarter, and it really was Arkansas fans' worst nightmare. Bobby Petrino's come back to light up your defense, but Arkansas did pull it out. But yeah, I think Bobby's changed with the times. I think there are probably principles that he adheres to, that he probably always has, going back to when he was a young coach. But yeah, I mean, he had some good players at Missouri State. They had a lot of FBS transfers. He had a dual threat quarterback. So if he's got a pocket passer, I think he's going to make that guy do good things. And if he's got a dual threat guy, he'll take advantage of that skill set too. He's not, like I say, he doesn't want to just throw the bomb. But there was a play. This was like prototypical by Petrino. They had a 4th and 1, maybe 4th and inches, like at the Arkansas 40 or 45. He went for it. And they play action, and they threw a touchdown pass. And you're like, man, that is just by Petrino. You saw that. You should have seen that coming a mile away. But, he's going to gamble some probably. I remember, it's funny. I'm not trying to tell my own home, but I remember telling people during the year, man, when A&M was struggling, I said, by Petrino, I think he's making about $300,000 at Missouri State, which is great money for an FCS coach. But I said A&M could probably pay him a couple million. And he's got his son, Nick, as his offensive coordinator, has a couple of son-in-laws on the staff. I said, well, heck, they could probably bring those guys as analysts. I don't understand why A&M doesn't go after Bobby Petrino. And somebody said, well, Bobby will never be an assistant again. He's got to run the show. And Jimbo would never, give up play calling to a guy like Bobby that would basically, I would assume, would ask for total power over the offense. Total control is probably a better word. And so I kind of, and it didn't happen. And then he went to UNLV, assuming he was going to work with Barry Odom, who, of course, was Arkansas's defensive coordinator. So they were going at it that night, play calling wise. And but I think he makes a lot of sense for A&M because obviously their offense has been in the dumpster, ditch, whatever metaphor you want to use. And Bobby Petrino, I think, is a guy that can get him out of there. I can tell you, Arkansas fans are probably not looking. They're not looking forward to going against him with the kind of talent he's going to have at A&M to work with after what he almost did to him with Missouri State.
I'm curious. There's only so much we can glean from coaches and press conferences and things like that. But I am curious about what you think the personality dynamic would be in a coach's room between Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino, from what you know about him.
Well, of course, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know Bobby Petrino real well. I was in press conferences with him. I never had Actually, I had one-on-one conversation with him. It was in the parking lot when one of their coaches fell ill. I was in the parking lot, and I saw this ambulance, and I couldn't figure out who it was, but I heard it was a coach, so I waited around. It was a Friday before a ball game, and the coaches all came out, and I figured out it was Willie Robinson. Had to be Willie Robinson, the defense coordinator, because I didn't see him. So I just waited there by my car, and Bobby comes out. He's carrying his clothes, over his shoulder because they're getting ready to go to their hotel, I guess, on Friday before the game. And I just went up to him and said, Bobby, what's going on? One of your coaches, I heard one of your coaches had to be taken to the hospital. And Bobby, to his credit, he filled me in, told me it was Willie, basically gave me a scoop, So I was happy about that. But, I think coaches' meetings probably get pretty heated. I mean, Bobby's a pretty intense guy. I think that's putting it mildly. And I have to believe if he came there, of course, I wasn't privy to negotiations with him and Jimbo, but I got to believe Jimbo had to give Bobby, control that offense. I can't believe Bobby would agree to come there and have Jimbo or anybody looking over his shoulder, so to speak. Obviously, Jimbo's the head coach, Bobby's the coordinator, but I got to believe Bobby, I don't know if he got it in writing, but I got to believe there's some kind of agreement that, hey, I'm running the offense. It's my offense. Like I say, Jimbo's the head coach, and maybe he can say, well, this is 4-down territory, or we're kicking a field goal or whatever. But I would have a hard time believing that Bobby Petrino would let anybody veto his play call. And maybe I'm wrong about that. That's just my opinion. But, Bobby's very exacting. I remember when he got fired, and they were, but they had most of the same staff back for 2012. John L. Smith came back as the interim coach. He'd been an assistant with Bobby. He'd been Bobby's head coach at Louisville, and Bobby was a coordinator. And then when John L. went to Michigan State, Bobby replaced him as Louisville head coach. But I remember talking to some veteran coaches who were at practice, some older guys, and they said that, basically those coaches were letting some things slide in practice as far as guys not running routes as precisely. I mean, if you're not running that route like to the inch you're supposed to, Bobby Petrino's going to stop practice, probably light into you, and make sure you run that route the right way. He's very precise. He's very exacting. He doesn't suffer mistakes very well. He's going to hold guys accountable, and so I wouldn't be surprised if those meetings could get a bit heated.
I'm interested, Bob, in your time, you've been there a long time. You've seen a lot of coaches come and go. How would you rate the Petrino era compared to other coaches in Arkansas during your time in Arkansas?
Well, I mean, he had a really good record. He took over for Houston Nutt, who had, Houston had a really good 10-year run. He won 75 games. Even I know that's 7.5 wins a year. And some of those were years you only played 11 games. And, so Houston Nutt did a really good job. But I guess, after 10 years, he kind of run its course, and he went to Ole Miss. And then Bobby came in, and they had kind of a rough first year, 5-7, but you could see the progress they were making. And then the next year they went 8-5. And the last 2 years they were, 10-2 and went to the Sugar Bowl, lost to Ohio State, probably should have beaten them. And the next year they went 11-2 and beat a good Kansas State team in the Cotton Bowl, finishing the top 10. So Bobby had it rolling. I will say this, until his fifth year at Louisville, he'd never been anywhere more than 4 years, and things kind of went off the rails. His last year at Louisville, he coached the Heisman Trophy winner Lamar a He'd won a lot of games. That last year he got fired going 2-8. And so I kind of wonder if, with his intensity or whatever you want to call it, if, Bobby kind of wears on people. So maybe he should only be somewhere 3-4 years. If you look at his track record, that's usually what he's done. He's been very successful. But, I think A&M, the offense is going to be a lot better with Bobby Petrino calling the plays. I have to believe.
It's an interesting situation because I'll touch on this. Everybody tries to get better in the offseason. We know that through recruiting, now the transfer portal, and, of course, coaching staffs are so huge in the SEC. Of course, A&M bringing in, they feel a home run at Petrino. What about your own situation? Kendall Brown's names was mentioned. He ends up staying at Arkansas. You're right. You have to replace your defensive coordinator. He's gone. Where do you feel Arkansas feels in relationship? They're always going to look, to LSU, whatever. Has this been a good offseason for Sam Pittman, and as he, adjusts or keeps his staff intact?
Yeah, it's been a lot of turnover, but, Sam, I'll give him credit. He's never been afraid. He's had some coaches leave because, they wanted to leave. Like Brad Davis's offensive line coach took a job at LSU because he was from Baton Rouge. Justin Stepp, his wide receivers coach, who was actually a holdover from Chad Morris's staff, went to Columbia, South Carolina, because he was from South Carolina. But Sam's also, whether he felt the guy wasn't a strong recruiter, maybe wasn't getting it done, he'll fire those guys. I mean, I think Sam Pittman's a good guy, and he's down home and all that stuff, but he's an SEC coach too. And he coached for Kirby Smart, I think he learned a lot from Kirby, and sometimes the SEC, you got to be kind of cutthroat. And if you feel like a guy's not getting it done, for whatever reason, then he's going to make a change. And he's done that with some guys. Barry Odom obviously was I know Arkansas had their issues on defense, but they didn't necessarily have the most talented defensive backs, and they lost Jalen Catalon, who's now resurfaced at Texas, which doesn't sit real well with Arkansas fans. But hey, guys are free to do what they want to do. And but Barry took the UNLV job, so they went out and got Travis Williams from Central Florida, with Gus Malzahn, and Travis had a background of playing at Auburn and coaching at Auburn. So he's obviously got an SEC pedigree, and he's a younger guy, really aggressive. Barry was a little bit more of a drop 8 sometimes. I mean, Barry tried to be aggressive too. A lot of it depends on your personnel. But one thing that they hired Florida's DB's coach to be their co-coordinator, but Travis Williams is going to call the plays. At least he's getting paid a lot more, so I assume he's going to call the plays. And those guys both were former recruiting coordinators. So I think one thing Sam's talked about, again, like I say, he coached with Kirby Smart, is, if you're going to win in the SEC, you better recruit at a pretty high level. And so I remember he said Kirby, when he brought in Sam as the O-line coach his first year at Georgia, he said, you got to change your room, meaning you got to recruit the guys that are going to help Georgia win at an elite level. And Sam did that before he left to come back to Arkansas as a head coach. But and of course, they lost Dow Loggins, their tight ends coach, to coordinator's job at South Carolina. But they brought in Morgan Turner from Stanford, who, if people know the NFL, Norv Turner's his uncle, and his dad, whose first name escapes me, was the head coach of the Bears at Ron Turner. And he's put a lot of players, Morgan Turner has, in the NFL. So I think that was a pretty good hire. Not saying, Dow Loggins was a former offensive coordinator in the NFL, so he was probably way overqualified to be a tight ends coach in college. But I think Sam's added some pretty good pieces. I think he's probably added some good recruiters. And so, in the SEC, you're always going to have turnover. And Kendall Browse, I think it was big to keep him. Some Arkansas fans get upset because he calls this play or that play. But overall, Arkansas has very balanced offenses. I think they averaged over 230 yards running and passing. Put up a lot of points. And so I know Mississippi State made a run at him, but I think it was good for Arkansas to retain Kendall. I think he's done a real good job.
I was getting back to is I want to look what Petrino adds to the A&M Arkansas rivalry, because I know Arkansas was upset when they lost losing those games to A&M. Then they finally beat A&M, and of course last year I think Arkansas felt they should have won that game. So now they're 7-6. That's going to be another big game this year. Now Petrino's on the other side. What's that going to add, do you feel, to the A&M Arkansas rivalry?
Oh yeah, it just pours a lot of fuel on it, because there's some Arkansas fans that never wanted Bobby fired. They felt like the sin didn't match the punishment, or whatever, the crime matched the punishment, or whatever you want to call it. And there are others that just, I wish that hadn't happened. He was still the coach. But like I say, I think Bobby, I think he's maybe after 4 or 5 years, maybe it's better for him to move on just with his personality and things. I may be wrong about that, but like I say, the only time he's ever been anywhere more than 4 years, he got fired, and it didn't end well at Louisville. The second stint, he had some, like I say, Lamar Jackson won the Heisman. They had some real good teams, but at the end, it was not going well. And but he went to Western Kentucky and did a good job. He did that before he went back to Louisville, and then he Missouri State hadn't been to the FCS playoffs in a million years, and he took them there for 2 years. It was weird. They were undefeated. They gave Arkansas all they wanted, and then after that, they kind of crashed. And maybe that game just took a lot out of them. But you look at Bobby's track record. He's won everywhere he's been and had really good offense. And it's going to add a lot, at least from an Arkansas standpoint, because I think they're like, oh man, we got to face Petrino. I mean, what they thought last year was bad. Now we got to face him in the SEC, and like I said, that's been a tough series for Arkansas. Lost a lot of close games. Probably, if you look at the last 10 years, there's probably 3 or 4 of those, including last year. You say, how did Arkansas lose that game? We all know that they were driving to go ahead 21-7, and then they had that crazy play that was basically like a 13-point turnaround. A&M missed the extra points, so it wasn't a 14-point turnaround, but it wasn't good. And that just seemed to turn the whole game around. But yeah, I don't think Arkansas fans are going to be real excited to face Bobby Petrino in the SEC.
Well, Bob, thanks for giving us so much of your time to break down that new Texas A&M hire. Real quick, I know people have followed your stuff, know who you are, and seen you on this, but let everybody know where they can find you and find your work.
Okay, well, I'll try to remember all this. We have different websites. We have ArkansasOnline.com. We've got NWA, which is NorthwestArkansasOnline.com. We have Whole Hog Sports. If you want to be a subscriber, we'd love it. And my Twitter, it's weird. It's kind of like your phone number. You never call yourself. I think I'm Bob Holt at ADG on Twitter. But yeah, we do have a paywall, which I know upsets some people, but it's about $1 a day. So if you want to know about the Razorbacks, so hopefully that'll be worth it to you.
Bob, I know with football, the bad thing about it is we don't get to go to Arkansas, or you don't get to come down here. But I know with Arkansas being such good in basketball, you guys follow them on the road. But now with Bobby here, whoever comes down can probably just stay at his house. I'm sure you guys got, saved the paper some money, and I'm sure he's got a room or two when he buys a house down here.
Yeah, I don't think Bobby would probably be, or any coach for that matter, not Bobby, probably any coach for that matter. I don't think he'd probably want to have a reporter staying at his house.
But different sports, that's what I meant. It's just come down for the basketball, not the football. I'm sure Bobby will put you up.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll check into that.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. Thank y'all for watching and listening to the My Aggie Nation podcast.